So welcome everybody to chapter 5 in our quality improvement plan journey web series. This is the second part of our change ideas content. This is change is hard, but figuring out where to start is harder. And thank you all for joining us today. It's great to see everybody. This is our first webinar after the break. So we can just go to the next slide. Thanks, friend. So I'm sure you're all familiar with using the Zoom platform, but just a quick refresh of the controls. So in the bottom left, you'll see a microphone icon as well as a video icon. This is to control your sound and video controls. So if you click on the mic and you see a line through it, you are muted. And if you click on the video icon and see a line, it means that you're not showing your camera. So you just click again to either speak or to show your camera. And as I said, it's lovely to see everybody's faces, but if you choose to have your camera off for whatever reason, please feel free to do that, whatever makes you comfortable. You can just go to the next slide. And in the bottom right, you'll see a little speech bubble with 3 dots, and this is the chat box. So if you do have a question throughout the presentation, please feel free to use this function to ask your question. We will be monitoring the chat throughout today's session. And we do respectfully ask that in the interest of getting through the content and avoiding additional background noise, if you're not speaking, that you do keep yourself muted and use this function to ask your questions as opposed to speaking throughout the presentation. But of course, at the end, we'll open up the floor if anybody wishes to speak and ask their questions at that time. Just go to the next slide. So learning objectives for today's session. We're going to go through one of our favorite tools, which is driver diagrams. And we're going to demonstrate how you can use this tool to illustrate your change ideas, know how to generate change ideas, rather important as this is the focus of today's session. Understand how to prioritize change ideas and assist with knowing where to start. This is using a tool called an impact effort grid, which is a really handy QI tool. At the end of the session, you should be able to name sources of your change ideas, know how to document them in relation to your quality improvement plan, and as always, discuss keys to success. So we know that quality improvement is a priority at several different levels. We know this from the Ministry of Health, the Centre of Excellence, and Ontario Health. So Ontario Health has a mandate to bring together a unified single team to execute the government strategy, oversee healthcare delivery, improve clinical guidance, and extend and strengthen quality and performance improvement capacities across the continuum of care. So that's what we're endeavoring to do. And we can see that quality improvement and QIPs closely work with your accreditation and your organization's strategic plan. And at the bottom there, you just saw a graphic come up that is actually taken from a quality improvement plan template. Just go to the next slide. So this is one of my favorite expressions. As healthcare providers, we all have 2 roles, providing care and improving care. So going beyond the status quo, we want to continuously endeavor to improve outcomes for our clients, tenants, etc. So this is a recap of chapters 1 to 4. And as I mentioned, all of these chapters are available on our website. So key highlights are starting with what you know and look for what data stands out. Using the 6 domains of quality, leverage the experience of your colleagues. You're not alone in developing your quality improvement plans. Using data for decision making and look for what sources of data are available to you. There's likely more than you would have thought of right at the top that are easily accessible to you. Everything that counts can't be counted. Look for qualitative data. Create your measurement plan and operationalize your definitions, numerator, denominator, and set your goals or targets. Record your measures on the QIP template. Graphically display and interpret data. Recognize that there are pitfalls around data collection and analysis, and go use your colleagues again to overcome those challenges. Understand the difference between activity and change ideas. Understand what a PDSA cycle is and how to use it to test your change ideas. Understand the relationship between predictions and data collection. Understand how to scope tests of change for rapid learning, and discuss keys to success. And I'm happy to introduce some of my favorite people. We have Alice Strawn joining us from Ontario Health. She's a quality specialist. And my good friend and colleague, Laura Daly-Trottier, they will be presenting today's content. And with that, I believe I'm handing it over to you, Laura.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot, Ash. Appreciate the way in which you present this information at the outset of every one of these chapters. It's very thoughtful and appreciated. Yeah, so driver diagrams. So what I wanted to do today was to link the driver diagram to the model for improvement to the quality improvement plan. And Alice is going to add that last piece in for us. And what I'm just going to walk through is, some of those pieces around the driver diagram that you might want to pay attention to. If you've never created one before, I'm hoping that this will be helpful. And for those of you that have used driver diagrams before, I'm hoping that this will be a nice little refresher for you. And so the main concept of a driver diagram is really to facilitate the link between your root causes that you have come up with in terms of your diagnostics activities and those change ideas that you are creating for your project. And your driver diagram lays out those your improvement project in a really simple format. And I really like the driver diagram because it can help you communicate your project from where you're wanting to go to how you're going to do that. It provides that visual, and I really appreciate visuals, and it's a one-pager as well, generally, a one-pager type document. And it is iterative. It can be updated and changed as you move along through the journey of your project work. And it works off of the theory of change. And this little cartoon is just to say that, between point A and point C, you need to have some detail around what's happening there in the middle. And then this cartoon is talking about step 2 and defining what that miracle, quote unquote, is in the middle. And when we apply the theory of change to the driver diagram, here are some points that you might want to think about to kind of ground you in your thoughts as you develop your driver diagram. So it's somewhat of a logic model to develop and communicate your approach to achieving your aim or your goal. It facilitates the link between your root causes, as I said, and your change ideas. It provides a great structure for identifying appropriate measures. So that family of measures, which I'll review with you in a few slides. And it helps answer the questions why and how, and a bit more on that a little bit later. And it identifies those hypothesized relationships between primary and secondary drivers, which are some of the key components of a driver diagram, and validates those relationships again between them. And when we think about the use of a driver diagram, we're actually applying the theory of improvement, which is an approach to help build and test theories for improvement within a given process or a system. So when you're building your driver diagram, you first need you need firsthand experience about the knowledge of that system. So this image just, it's a bit blurry, but really it's a, I think you can tell that it's a tree and a car, and they've had an interaction. And a tree diagram is employed, they're wanting to show you the difference between the tree diagram, which you may have heard of, and the driver diagram. And a tree diagram is used when answering the question, what are we trying to accomplish? And can help break down that problem into a manageable size, and it's more of a permanent diagram. Whereas on the other hand, a driver diagram is used to answer the question, what changes can we make that will result in an improvement? And it helps a team identify those categories of change as well as the specific changes that can be made to bring about that quality improvement. So this image is just a simple image to show you the 4 main components of a driver diagram. So there's a couple of points I'll make here. One is that you will have an aim, a primary driver, and a change idea for sure if you're going to create a driver diagram, but you may not have a secondary driver. It depends on the complexity of your project. And the other thing that you may have is a tertiary driver, which is another layer that you would add in to the right of a secondary driver. But again, dependent upon the complexity of your change initiative will determine whether you have those tertiary drivers or not, or even a secondary driver. And you can have multiple change ideas. This is not prescriptive in terms of where the arrows are. You can adjust and make it however suits your project. And as a reminder for our aim, we want to make sure that it is SMART. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And it should be meaningful to the people we serve. And of course, also meaningful to the people who provide the service. And a well-written aim statement helps you to identify what those outcome measures are. And I'll show you a bit about that and how that aligns with the diagram. So primary drivers are those big buckets or big topics or big areas that you're wanting to work on in order, and that will need to happen in order to achieve your aim. And those key areas of your system that you'll need to influence within your project should be captured within your drivers. So thinking about those those key areas, larger buckets, those become your primary drivers. To start, you may make some adjustments to it, but to start, that's how you can develop your primary drivers. And they help you identify what your process measures may be. And again, as I had said, you don't always have those secondary drivers, but if you do, remember that those secondary drivers actually influence the primary drivers. So those are the things that you will need to have in place to positively influence your primary driver. And the difference between your primary and your secondary drivers is an important one. So if the driver is big, if you have a secondary driver that's getting large in concept, you might want to consider moving it over into the primary driver column and working from there. So just some thoughts to keep in mind when you're developing it. And those secondary drivers can really help ground you in identifying what your change ideas are. And that's, I think, one of the big things that I wanted to bring forward today is that developing your driver diagram can actually help you develop your change ideas. And your change ideas, of course, it's a fun part of a project. Is, oftentimes when we are working on understanding what our problems are and developing our root causes, we actually jump to those change ideas fairly early on in our thinking. And so when we get to actually, moving into those change ideas in a thoughtful way, and we've grounded ourselves in what our root causes are, it can be really exciting because we've been waiting for this moment. And so, yeah, when you're looking at those change ideas, those are those things that you would need to test in order to make an impact on your outcome. And there may be more than one change idea for each secondary driver that you've identified. And those change ideas are based on your root causes that you've identified by your team. And I will say this a couple of times throughout this little presentation, but a Pareto chart and or a process map might be good starting points for you in terms of developing out your change ideas and your secondary drivers. Here's your reminder about your family of measures. So you've heard us chatting about outcomes and process and balancing measures. And so we wanted to just remind you that your outcome measures are the goal where you're wanting to head towards, what your ultimate apple pie in the sky is. And it measures the voice of the client typically. And your process measures are those things that you are measuring as part of the workings of your system. So are you doing the right things, and are you doing the right steps? And the measures that are calculated for your balancing is related to, are those changes that you're making in one part of the system impacting another? And keeping your eye on those is going to be really important as well. And the driver diagram also helps you place those measures. So as I had said before, the development of your driver diagram can happen in a number of ways. If you're stuck, start looking at by looking at your Pareto chart, then take a look at your process map and see if you can kind of group some of those drivers into the secondary driver column, and then affinitize those into themes to create to the left your primary driver. And then looking to the right, think about your change ideas. I moved my cursor off the wrong. And here's where you would place your process and your outcome measures. And if you ask the question how, and answer it from the left to the right, you should have a logical thought that comes through, or a logical way of describing your project by answering the question how, from the aim all the way over to the change ideas. And if you answer the question why from the right to the left and working backwards, again, you should be able to answer each from the change idea to the secondary to the primary. And I'll give you an example of that here. So when you were looking at this example for the purposes of today, this is household garbage. So by 8:30 on the 1st of January of 2016, household garbage placed at the curb for pickup will be reduced from 2 bags to 1 bag each week. And the primary drivers for this particular project is to reduce the amount of waste created, reuse and recycle, increase awareness, change the culture. If we move over to the secondary drivers, we will have things like acquire less material with packaging, reduce our paper waste, donate clothing, assign tasks associated with waste reduction. And here are some change ideas that have been populated in the change idea column, which is purchasing baking materials at the bulk store, cancel your newspaper, mark 1 day a month on the calendar to sort your clothes, buy your Brita water filter, put the green bin in the washroom. So these are some change ideas that hopefully will impact the aim and the goal. And some measures that could be added to this would be the number of bags of garbage as your outcome. So you're wanting to reduce that. The number of items purchased at the bulk store, for example, would be a process measure that you would attach to that change idea. So asking the question how, so how are we going to reduce from 2 bags to 1 bag each week? If we ask the question, how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by reducing the amount of waste created in our primary driver, reuse and recycle, and increase awareness and change and culture. So how are we going to do that? We're going to acquire less materials with the packaging, reduce the paper waste, donate clothing, assign tasks associated with waste reduction. And how are we going to do that? By implementing or integrating these change ideas and testing these change ideas out, not implementing. I didn't say that. Asking the question why from the left. So why is it that you're purchasing baking materials at the bulk store? Why have you made that change? Why are you canceling your newspapers? Why are you marking that day on the month on the calendar to sort your clothes? Why are you buying the Brita water bottles? And why are you putting the green bin in the washroom? Well, I'm doing this because I want to acquire less materials with my packaging, reduce waste, donate my clothing, and assign tasks associated with waste reduction. Why do you want to do that? Well, I want to reduce the amount of waste. I want to reuse, recycle, and increase my awareness and change the culture. And of course, the ultimate why is your goal, your aim. This is an example from the sector where we have the CMHA York South Simcoe Bounce Back team did a project with E-QIP and developed this nifty little driver diagram. And they have plotted on here a large number of measures. And I thought it was really helpful as somebody from the outside looking in to say, okay, well, how are they going to measure these changes and be aware of the different parts of their driver diagram and how they're going to be measuring that. And so you can see, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in terms of the descriptors of the drivers, but the slide deck will be shared with you afterwards. And if you want to take a closer peek at this example, it'll be included in the deck, so you can take a gander at that. But I thought it was really a really great way to display their project. The one thing I'll bring to your attention is they've added another layer of their big dot aim. So some of us might have, that larger goal of the organization that this particular project feeds into, and it's nice to be able to annotate that on your driver diagram. So I would encourage you to do so if you have kind of that bigger dot that you're aiming towards. The other thing that I will also say is I've seen organizations who have that big dot aim with a driver diagram associated with it, and then they break their driver diagram down into projects, and then they pull those projects out, and then each of those individual projects become their own independent driver diagram. So it can be a really helpful tool. The other thing that I wanted to bring your attention to was this link that we will provide to you at the end of this presentation. It'll be part of the slide deck. But if you're wanting to read a little bit more about driver diagrams, I encourage you to take a few minutes to read this article, What's Your Theory? By Brandon Bennett and Lloyd Provo. And really what they have done is they've taken the driver diagram to generate change ideas by way of using change concepts. And I won't go into a lot of detail because it's in the article, but it's just a different way of looking at the utility of your driver diagram and bundling your concepts and change ideas. And the piece that I really found interesting and helpful when thinking about generating change ideas and concepts is asking this series of questions to generate the concept and generate those alternatives, because sometimes a change idea might not work, and so it helps us to generate some additional alternatives to what our change ideas are. So more creative thinking around how you might solve a particular problem. So looking at generating change ideas, some key messages here is that we want to know why something is happening through the diagnostics. Now that we know that, we have the data to show that we have an issue, so that's the measurement part. And we want to brainstorm ways in which we can fix this issue through coming up with those change ideas with our staff, clients, tenants, and others that are part of that process. So if possible solutions are not immediately identifiable, or if past attempts have failed, there are ways to generate new and different ideas. And there are tools that can be used to help us get unstuck. I'll share a few of those with you today. And the other part I wanted to bring forward here is that we really great to see the inclusion of clients and tenants and care providers in this point of the process. It's a really key message that I wanted to drive forward today. And the client focus groups are a really great way to get ideas, as well as some emotion or experience-based design as other examples in those change ideas around how to fix the problem of your system. So back to our good old model for improvement, which grounds us in all of this work. We are now at the third question. So what changes can we make that will result in improvement? And before we actually begin to select those change ideas to be tested, we wanted to talk about and share some tools to help you generate ideas and think about possible solutions to your problems, and in some new and creative ways. And we're not going to go through in detail how to use each of the tools today, but we'll give you kind of the list of them that you can look, and we have some resources that you can tap into to learn more about the utility of each of those tools. And we also would like to say that we want you to resist that temptation to quickly think that you have the answers to the question about what your change needs to be. So be prepared to think hard on what your root causes are, and make sure that you believe in those root causes before you start moving forward in your change ideas. And so sometimes, you know, we're kind of like Douglas and we're stuck inside the box and we're having a hard time getting out of the box. And, you know, I'm not particularly, that's like my mom's stance, you know, when you have your hands on your hips, and I'm not suggesting that we do that, but perhaps forcing ourselves to think a little bit differently about our problems and not be like Douglas. And some of the things that I wanted to bring forward today is around change concepts. So change concepts, they can really strengthen your driver diagram and the thinking behind your driver diagram. And it can help you also to design your change ideas to achieve that improvement. When we're talking about change concepts as a starting point to generate change ideas, I want you to think about the idea of activity. So sometimes there are some activities that you need to do before you test a change. And so as an example, getting a list of your transitional case management clients as a starting point. That's not a change idea in and of itself. It's an activity to work towards the change idea. So just flagging that as well. So you want to think about all those activities that you need to do before you can actually test your change idea. It's also important for us to remember that not all change leads to improvement, but all improvement requires change. So what kind of change will lead to improvement? We use the change concepts as a general notion or approach in developing those specific ideas for change that lead to improvement, for testing our theory. And your ideas need to be specific enough to test and implement in a particular situation. So moving from idea or thought to specific idea that is actionable. And our theory is that if we make it easier to put things into the green bin, then more pieces will go into the green bin. And this is called smoothing the workflow, or might be considered a reminder. And that concept is then applied to your thoughts, belief, or theory. So you can test your assumptions and you come up with specific change ideas then that you can test on a small scale. And the important thing to consider is that at this point, most of what you're thinking about in terms of change ideas are actually still concepts, and that's okay. So just remember that in order to prove your theory about that concept, you'll need to think about those tests of change. And in this example, we have the aim to increase wait time for service initiation. And the example of change concepts that you might pull from would be to minimize the number of steps at central intake, adjust the resource supply to match the demand, and eliminate the rework. And some change ideas that would come off of that could be, as an example, decrease the number of programs involved, modify the mental health counselors to match predictable times of the week and month, and when numbers of referrals is higher. So design a computer-based form that doesn't allow submission, so that forced function until all the required fields are completed. So that's just an example of where you would go from a change concept to a change idea. And sometimes we get asked the question, you know, where do change concepts come from? Here, let me just put you so the change concepts can come from, change can come from change concepts. So it's a list of change concepts. your current state, so you're looking at what's happening in your current system, experience and evidence. And within the context of the change concepts, there is a list within the IHI Improvement Guide that has a list of change concepts that you can reference. So as an example, one of the things on there is called eliminating waste. There's a whole list of them, but yeah, you can take a peek at that. The current state, you would look at your process, your system, do some value stream mapping on current state, some problem solving that you have done, and data will also point you in a good direction around what it is you're looking for in terms of areas of improvement. Evidence, there is a lot of literature that you can review. So guidelines, best practice, and a really great resource are the people that experience your service. So clients, tenants, caregivers, families, your own experience, your staff's experience, and the communities of practice and their experiences. So you have all those places to get your information from and generate change ideas from, which is really great. However, it all boils down to and funnels into those small tests of change. So what is it that you're going to test? What will have the biggest impact? And so those small cycles of test are really where the hard work is done. There are also two types of change that we wanted to share with you and talk about today. So reactive changes, those are the changes that are about keeping that system running, solving problems or reactions to problems, return the system to prior condition. Often a reactive change is the best strategy, and it's important for organizations to make reactive changes to respond to the situation, COVID-19. And maintain the system. So in the garbage example, you could start to take bags of garbage to work with you or put them on the neighbor's lawn, for example. You know, that would focus on symptom being too many bags. So you're wanting to get rid of a bag so that you can reach your goal, right? So you put it over on the neighbor's lawn. These are changes or reactions that are routinely made in order to make you, to keep you you know, thinking that you're making a change. But when we think about improvement to a system of care, we would want you to think about things beyond these reactive changes and think about those fundamental changes. So the fundamental changes alter how the work or activity is done. They're necessary for improvement beyond your problem, and they have a lasting impact. And the important notion is not the size of the change, but the impact the change has. Those big improvements can often be realized by making small changes directed at the right places in the system. So for this example, I want to engage some activity in the chat box, if I may. So I want you to like sit up in your chairs. I want you to look at the glass of water and get ready to type in the chat box how many different ways we can come up with on how to empty this glass of water. So when you're typing, I want you to think about the rule. There's only one rule. So the glass and or the table may not be moved. So think on that. And as you come up with your creative ideas on how we're going to empty this glass of water without, okay, wow, you guys are quick. Straw, your cat. A siphon, a towel, a scoop, a drop of boiling rock. Get the dog to drink it. Drill a hole from the bottom. Ooh, through the glass. That would take a special tool. Siphon, Kevin. Kevin the dog. A vacuum. Very great. That's awesome. So there was a few that I hadn't thought about, which, you know, brings me to the point of many minds can really be helpful. And also, I'm going to guess that by reading some of these, some of you came up and generated some of your own ideas just by reading others' responses and got your mind moving. And so change ideas can be a really interactive activity for a group. So thank you for that. I really just wanted to share that with you to say there are many ways of creating change ideas, and you can come up with some pretty quickly, some change ideas pretty quickly. And I'm just struggling with moving a window on my screen here. My apologies. There we go. I wanted to make the chat box bigger, and now I'm struggling to get it to go smaller. So there's a variety of techniques that you can take a look at in terms of developing, generating creative change ideas. Here's 4. There are many of them out there, but this is the 4 that we generally gravitate towards when you're stuck in the box with Douglas and you're having a hard time. Change concepts, random words, mental benchmarking, and TRIZ reversals. So thinking of, on those different ways of generating change ideas could be really helpful for you to get yourself outside of the box and get unstuck. The other things we want you to consider when you are looking at your change ideas is making sure that you start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Steal shamelessly. This is a really great one. If you know that somebody else has made a change in their system and it's working really, really well, by all means, steal the idea from them, give them credit, of course, with a caution to be careful to understand your root cause first, and remembering that plug and play rarely works. So there will likely be some modifications that you would need to make to their change ideas in order for it to work in your system well. And I'm going to share with you 2 slides that we shared quite a bit with organizations around, they've generated their change ideas, they've got this whole plethora and selection to choose from, but where do you start? And these tools can be helpful in terms of having a conversation with your teams about where to start. So this is it's called the hierarchy of effectiveness. And really it says to select those high leverage change ideas early on to facilitate sustainability. And the high leverage are design systems to avoid mistakes, so that error proofing, those forced functions, adding in equipment to avoid repetitive tasks, forcing the completion of a document such as a discharge plan before a client record can be closed are good examples of that. System-based recommendations have a higher likelihood of success because they do not rely on individual attention. Not one person is responsible. And appreciate that a small number of higher leverage, more effective recommendations addressing the contributing factors determined from the incident analysis will be more likely to improve your patient safety than a large number of less effective strategies. And the other thing that we're trying to say here, and we'll say here, is that we're not asking you to not do the low leverage, which is usually around those rules, policies, and guidelines and education. But on their own, they're not as effective. And so you may need to add the medium and high leverage layers to those change ideas in order for them to have that impact. And my last slide before I hand it off to Alice is to design your change ideas around the idea of, if the staff perceive the idea to be high value and reduce their workload, the adoption of that is fairly high. Whereas if it increases their workload and they're not behind it and they don't perceive the value of it, that it will actually be less uptake. So this bubble here says design for here. So when you're looking at your change ideas, make sure you have that high value reduce the workload, or at least it stays the same in order for you to move forward in that. So I'm going to pass it off to Alice to take us through the impact effort grid and the quality improvement plan.
Thanks, Laura. So if you've done all your good work and used some of those tools that Laura just suggested to you, now you might be at a different place than you were when you first started to think about this. Maybe you started off thinking, well, gee, what can we do? What are our change ideas? How are we ever going to do this? Now you're going to be at, where do I start? I've got 100 ideas and I really don't know where to start. And so this is a place where we can take things back to being really, really simple. And really, really simple is an impact effort grid. So on the next slide, we just talk about what is an impact effort grid. Well, it is just what it says. It's a 2x2 grid. Very, very simple. It looks at effort on one axis and it looks at impact on the other. And remember, this is a tool to help you think about where to start. Or maybe you like to use the word priorize. It's not a tool to say we shouldn't do this or we should only do that. Because if your change ideas have made it this far, they all have value to what it is you're trying to do. Now what you're trying to figure out is, you know, to use Laura's phrase earlier, given what we have, knowing where we are, where should we start? And so the steps on the next slide with an impact effort grid, really, really simple. Again, you know, have all your change ideas, no matter how many of those great tools you may have used or focus groups that you have or things that you've written down on little sticky notes that are all around your computer screen because they've been thoughts that have come to you. Bring all those together, make your grid, and have a conversation about effort and impact for each solution. If you go to the next slide, Laura, actually, we can actually see one. And so the boxes, although they're labeled, you know, minor, major, difficult, easy, we all know things aren't quite that black and white. So when you're taking your change ideas, and a sticky note is a good thing to use because you can move it around, think about where do I place it within the box? So as an example, if something is not difficult, but not easy, but has major impact, you might actually place it on the line between difficult and easy and halfway up in the row called major improvement or benefit. The placement in the grid matters because what we're really looking for is some sort of visual that then you and your team can sit back and go, oh, okay, now let's take a look at where we might want to start with all this. So the next slide shows you an example of one that, you know, has the change ideas in it. The only disagreement I have with this diagram, with this image that we've used here, is that although, yes, of course, you know, high impact, low effort, quick wins, do this now, maybe it's not quite that simple. You need to still have a conversation about it. You know, high impact, high effort, be selective because it's going to take more resource. Sure. Bottom, low and low, you know, fill in, defer these. Again, have a conversation. But I want to caution you that just because something is high effort, low impact, don't throw it away. It just might not be right now. And it might only be high effort, low impact right now because you're starting where you are and using what you have. And so just like the driver diagram, an impact effort grid is dynamic and it's just prioritization. It's not yes, no, it's not black and white, has opinion and all kinds of things wrapped into it, but it starts to give you that visual sense of where you might begin. It's not a solo activity, just like we've talked about with all the other great QI stuff you do. Bring people around you. And, you know, even though we're virtual, take a picture of it, send it around to people, say, does this make sense to you? If you are in an area where you can actually, people are there and you can actually look at something, post it up on a wall. And the next diagram is really my preferred way to do an impact effort grid. And that is with sticky notes. And this happens to be a whiteboard. This could be a piece of flip chart paper, because what I like about this is that as other people look at it, they'll say, well, you know, I know you thought that that was going to be really high effort. But did you know that now we have, I don't know, I'm going to make something up. We have a summer student coming on. I'm really making something up now, who's going to be able to help us with that. And so actually the effort goes down. So the more eyes you can have on it, the more conversation you can have around this. It's about the conversation and the discussion that you have. And then as a group, you get people engaged and moving in the same direction with respect to what it is you're going to do. But, you know, the main message, just like any tool, is the discussion is really important. And on the next slide, you know, sometimes we underestimate the influence of little things. Let's also think about the fact that some of those, you know, very high impact activities that we might want to do might also be kind of boil the ocean things. And we do want to think carefully about the power or the influence of the little things that we can do. And sometimes when we're just trying to get started, that low effort, low impact, show people that we can really do this might be where you actually want to start. So not black and white. Let you have a discussion. Let you have some of that, what do you think about this kind of conversations, which are critical to quality improvement? So let's say you've been able to decide, you've used the impact effort grid, and now here you are, you're back at your quality improvement plan. Just to remind you, has 3 parts, a narrative, a work plan, and a progress report. Progress report comes second year, not first year. So it'll be new for those of you who submitted last year. And for those of you who are submitting for the first time, you won't see a progress report this year. Next slide shows us that change ideas belong on the work plan. And we have this area called change on the work plan, highlighted in green. Green means go. I don't know if we were being that specific when the color was actually chosen, but it is in this area that we want to actually document your change ideas. And so again, just to relate to the model for improvement, you've seen this many times. Click once for me, Laura. You know, what are we trying to accomplish? We know that's the red area of aim. How will we know that change is an improvement? We've got our measures. And obviously, what changes can we make that will result in improvement? We've got our change ideas. So that nice whole green section. So the next couple of slides give us some blow-ups of that change section. So this is the same document. I've just blown it up and taken a piece out so that you can see. So you'll see the first column, planned improvement initiatives. What are your change ideas? Change ideas, okay? Think about, this is now a 1-year plan, and we want to know what it is you're going to do. So what we really don't want to see here are change concepts like reduce duplication. What does that mean? We want to see change ideas here. What are the things that you're actually going to be able to test and try and hopefully implement over the next year that are going to lead you towards your aim, what it is you're trying to improve? What are the methods? What will you do? And in some cases, this may be very well fleshed out. And in other cases, you may have to develop that plan. Cool, but tell us. We need to know. What are your process measures? Process measures will be as dynamic as your change ideas are. But if we don't start thinking about these right off the start, it's too easy to lose track of the data. We don't want to lose track of the data. And let's remember that if we come across something that we really can't measure qualitatively or quantitatively, we might want to rethink that change idea. So every box in here matters. What's your target? What are you trying to do? 100%, 80%, 90%, whatever it is. And give us your comments here. You know, is there something it might be a barrier or an enabler that people need to know about? You, leadership, your reader, whoever. Not things like, you know, we're worried about, you know, staff turnover in the next year. Well, sure you are. Of course you are. But if you're really going to be able to work through this change idea, then you've probably already considered that in your change idea. That's not the kind of thing you put in comments here. You may put in comments here that, you know, if we need to adopt or adapt this one, it will lead to a second change idea, something like that. So I put a couple of examples in here because I wanted to show you a couple of things about this spreadsheet. It is an Excel template. That means, and it's unlocked. That means you can add rows and you can add things. So, you know, here's one, change idea number 1 in your first row. The first box there under methods should have enough detail that someone else can understand what it is you're going to do. shouldn't have to guess here. A reader should be able to understand, and given everything else that you've told them in the narrative and everything else that you've told them in your aim and target section, they should be able to go, huh, that's interesting. Wonder how that will work out. Not, huh, where did that come from? There should be no surprise here. It should all link together. The process measures are the data that you'll collect that'll tell you whether or not this change idea is doing what you'd hoped it would do. Pretty simple. Targets, what is your goal with respect to what this change idea will do? It's your best guess. And your comments, what else does the reader have to know in order to understand what you're intending? And then you would go on to change idea number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, however many you have, and you would list them all out. Now, the next slide, I want to show you how it may not all fit in one row, and that's okay. Add rows, okay? But that's the reason why it is unlocked, the reason why it's a template. In other sectors who submit their quality improvement plans online, they have unlimited boxes that they can add. And so in Excel, those unlimited boxes are your ability to add rows. So change idea number 1 might have 3 or 4 or 5 steps. We want to hear about those and we want to know all of them. Otherwise, it may not make sense to us what it is you're trying to do. And as the reader, we want to make sense. And, you know, my sort of final, if I haven't said it often enough, this next slide is, why does that matter? Well, because I really wish I was a mind reader, but I'm not, so tell me. So always with your quality improvement plans, you should be thinking about, if I showed this to somebody who really didn't know a lot about what we do, except that, you know, we're a mental health and addictions agency and we offer a ABC program, would they understand what it is we're trying to do with our change ideas? And if the answer is no, go back and put in more detail. Because if you, there's probably 2 reasons why you can't articulate exactly what it is you're going to do within your quality improvement plan. One is because you don't feel you have enough space, and that's solvable. Add rows, add rows, add rows, add rows. But the second is maybe because that quality improvement plan isn't well enough thought out yet. Then that's a conversation with your team to decide, do we want to take a stab at this one? Do we have enough confidence? Does our impact effort grid tell us? Does our discussion tell us? Where did it sit in the driver diagram? What do we have available? Have that conversation. Or do we really need to take a step back on this? And we're not ready to commit this yet because we haven't really done enough work. Both of those conversations are very valid and very important in you being able to lay out your quality improvement plan. I can tell you that in my experience, what you first want to put in that plan is way too much. So if you get to this point and you have to start pulling things out, probably a good idea, because you've probably got way more in there than you're really going to be able to do. And so needing to have it take a step back at this point and do that little bit of a reality check is good. Show your quality improvement plan to your mother, your relatives, your neighbor, your friend. Ask them to read it. Just say, does this make sense to you? Because that's the kind of thing that happens when reviewers read your quality improvement plans. They're trying to make sense of it. And if you can tell the complete story, which the plan as it's laid out enables you to do, then it's a good plan. If you can't tell the complete story in your plan, then go back and think about what detail do I need to add. Now, it doesn't mean that it needs to be, a lot of fluff and wordsmithing. It just means that it really needs to reflect the results of all that great work that you've done that Laura talked about in this plan. And then next year you'll come back and you'll revisit it and you'll tell us that some things worked and some things didn't. But the better you're able to lay it out the first time, the easier that progress report comes. And then you'll just continue to generate year on year on year. So that's all I had to say about that today. I think I'm doing the keys to success, and then I think I'm handing it over to Rishi, I believe, at that point. So our next 2 slides are our growing list of keys to success. And as you know, each time we do one of these webinars, we add on. So here we are at chapter 5. And our book is starting to have a few pages to it. So these are the ones that you've seen before, and the next slide as well. We were already on to being a bit of a volume, I guess, in terms of books. But on our second slide, we can see that, oh yes, thank you. Lori is doing the outro today. Thank you for that. These are the ones that we've added at the bottom in orange. So, information that Laura shared with us, ask why and how when building out your driver diagram. Think about those secondary drivers. If it's not very complex, you might not have them. If it's really complex, you might have tertiary drivers. And you might start to slice your driver diagram at different levels. Resist your temptation, to jump in too soon. Understand your root cause first. And if you've been given, I'll say it this way, even if you've been given a solution, do root cause. Because there's nothing worse than spending time and energy and getting fairly far down the road and realizing the solution you were given was not the right solution. Things change. The solution you were given may be a starting point of a discussion, but as Laura said, rarely does cut and paste work. You need to think about it in your own environment. Think small, scale down your ideas by at least one. If somebody said to me, we're going to test this for a week, I would say, do it for a morning. If they told me they were going to do it with all of their diabetic patients, I would say, take the next 10 who come through the door. Quality improvement is about learning. And the faster we can turn these cycles, the faster we can learn, the faster we can gather data, the faster we can get that data over time that you heard about in the last session. Consider impact and effort, but don't discard ideas based on that alone. Sometimes it's where you need to start. Sometimes it's where you have your enthusiasm. The work plan needs to tell somebody else what you're trying to achieve. It's your story. We've been telling you a story. Your work plan is your story, combined with the narrative. And you will have less time than you think. Start with what you have, and your change ideas will be more complex than you think they are. Use what you have. If it seems too simple, talk about it a little bit more. Bring it back to the next meeting. Ask questions. Think about your theories. There will always be a little bit more complexity than you thought about. So if sometimes it feels like it's going slow, it's because you need to go slow to go fast. And having those conversations early on will enable you to have success more quickly once you are able to get going. And so with that, in 3 minutes to spare, I'm going to turn it over to Lori to talk real fast and get through the last 3 slides.
Thank you, Alice. First up is our resources. So on the E-QIP website, we have links to tools and resources regarding change concepts, change ideas, and different activity templates. There's also a link to the quality improvement plan template as well. And included in this slide deck is a link to the What's Your Theory driver diagram article that Laura referenced earlier, written by Brandon Bennett and Lloyd Provo. Coming up next is chapter 6 of our series, Read Me a QIP Story. So the objectives of this are to understand the purpose and the pieces of the QIP narrative, understand how to engage clients and tenants in the quality improvement journey, and understand the importance of partners and stakeholder engagement in the journey as well, and discuss some keys to success. And the link to register will be included in your slide deck. New, we're introducing a new chapter, Measurement Series Session 3. As we continue our story, the dish ran away with the run chart. This will be an overview of run charts. The objectives will be understand the different types of variation and the relationship to improvement, understanding why run charts are useful in quality improvement, learning how to create and interpret run charts and use the run chart rules, understand how to tell the story of a run chart, adding annotation, terminology, etc., and discussing some keys to success. This session will be held February 2nd from 12 until 1 p.m. And the link to register will be part of the slide deck. Also a reminder to save the date, April 13th, 2021, for our QI Innovations Understand, Pivot, Change virtual conference. And there's a link if you would like to submit an abstract submission. There's a link on the slide deck to do so. Also a reminder to register for measurement-based care in mental health and addiction service delivery. This is a 3-part education series that will look at how measurement-based care can drive improved patient outcomes and more efficient service delivery. And there's a link there to learn more about this series. So we ask that you help us evaluate our event, and please take a few minutes to complete our evaluation, and the link to the survey is included in your slide deck. And a reminder to register for our Foundations to Quality Improvement Ideas e-learning course. Oh, my chat box just popped up. And there will be a link in the slide deck to register for that as well. And you can visit us on our website at www.e-QIP.ca. You can connect with our community of practice on Quorum, and you can follow us on Twitter. And all the links will be in the follow-up email, which will come out tomorrow. And just a reminder that on YouTube, we have some quick QI webinar series. There's a series of 9 webinars, which are 20 to 30 minutes long and based on firsthand experiences and case studies. You can also sign up for our mailing list and receive notices of future webinars and training events and our newsletter. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thanks so much for joining us today, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. And again, look forward to the follow-up email with all the links, including the evaluation, links about our upcoming conference and ideas training coming out tomorrow. And hope to see you all at the next chapter.